Well, hello, good afternoon, and welcome to episode 92 of Humanity versus Insanity, the Crane Report. And this is election special number 4, coming to you live from the UK Column Studios in Plymouth at 3 o'clock on the afternoon of Thursday, 8th of June 2017. And this is the day that is, without any shadow of doubt, going to go down in history one way or the other, because it is being billed as an election, but it's a lot more than an election. Today is actually a contest between the corporatist establishment and the rapidly awakening masses. This is using Zbigniew Brzezinski's term, where he referenced the biggest obstacle to the New World Order being the rapid political awakening of the masses. And the establishment know very well that they are on a knife edge. And we're going to see some of the indications of that knife edge as we go through. But of course, the most telling example is the outrageous media campaign. And with effectively all but one of the national newspapers being part of the corporatist establishment, then this has become an absolute hit piece on Jeremy Corbyn. And it's an obvious indication of desperation. And, the front page of The Sun today listing, supposedly Corbyn's negative attributes: the terrorist friend, useless on Brexit, destroyer of jobs, enemy of business, massive tax hikes, puppet of unions, nuclear surrender, ruin of spending, open immigration, and Marxist extremist. Now, under different circumstances, I would suggest that Jeremy Corbyn would have a very, very good case for libel here. Because most of these claims, in fact, all of these claims as they are written there, really cannot be substantiated and would not stand up to scrutiny in a court of law. But all rules are pushed out of the window now. And if this was a banana republic, then the Electoral Reform Society would probably have something to say about the way in which the establishment is conducting this election campaign. But hey, this is the UK. We don't get involved in tactics where we hit below the belt. Really? I mean, it is, as I think was alluded to on the UK Column News today, comic book politics. But The Sun, it was fairly predictable they were going to run something like this, the Murdoch press. This, of course, from 25 years ago. And this is the classic Sun headline, where it was actually believed that Neil Kinnock was an absolute shoo-in back in 1992 to take over from John Major. But this was the Sun headline: "If Kinnock wins today, will the last person to leave Britain please turn out the lights?" And once again, it was a classic hit piece. But back in 1992, this was at least 4, if not 5 years before the internet really started to take a hold, and a good decade before a significant chunk of the population had ready access to the internet. So things are very, very different 25 years on. And The Sun was bragging the day after that election, it's the Sun what won it. And this was true. It's very true. And there's no question that the Murdoch press has influenced the outcome of every general election basically since probably 1976, if not 74 maybe. But their influence is waning, and Murdoch knows it. Increasingly, people are getting their information from more than a single source. And more people, like me, only part money for rags like The Sun and the Mail so that we can actually see what a significant chunk of the population still believes to be the gospel truth. But maybe it's getting to the point where perhaps half the readership is buying it for exactly the same reason. And it is comic book tactics. But let's have a look at the statistics, because these are very, very significant. So let me just draw your attention here. This is the current reported circulation of The Sun and the Mail. Interestingly, The Sun there, 1.666 million. But this is down from 3 million when David Cameron came into office in 2010. So the Sun's readership has fallen by the circulation has fallen by over 40% in 7 years. And the Daily Mail has fallen from 2.12 million in 2010 to 1.5 million today. So the combined readership of the Sun and the Mail is just a little more than the Sun's readership alone in 2010. And if you look at that listing there, as you go through there, with the exception of the Evening Standard, which has increased in circulation, but that's because it went from being a paper that you had to pay for to now one that you simply pick up as you go home on the train or the bus. But every print media which is still paid for has fallen in that 7 years. And of course, the same is true for the BBC and ITV. People are still watching TV, but they're watching Netflix, they're watching TV more for movies than they are for their information. So if, like me, you picked up a copy of the Sun today, then from this point forward, you know exactly what to do with it. And this, I think, illustration, I think this was in Liverpool, where, of course, if you are carrying a copy of the Sun, it is potentially a risk to your health and well-being, because the Sun has effectively been a dirty word in Liverpool ever since the outrageous coverage following the Hillsborough disaster back in 1989. Well, I wouldn't normally acknowledge the Daily Mirror, but it is the only national daily paper that is effectively getting behind. And I think of Jeremy Corbyn, and I think that in the scheme of things, the Daily Mirror has actually been quite restrained in its reporting and its condemnation of Theresa May. Inside, of course, they pick up on the theme of Liar, Liar, which I believe is number 4 in the UK charts, but of course the BBC won't play it. But here's the obvious statement: why you can't believe a single word she says, and the observation only a Labour government will give us a better future. Well, actually, the Labour coming into office will actually give us at least an opportunity for the unknown and to actually contribute to crafting that future. Whereas, of course, if Theresa May gets back into office, we know very, very well what is going to unfold over the next few years, and she hasn't pulled any punches. And if she does manage to get the majority, then what it will show is that a significant chunk of the British electorate is actually suffering from Stockholm Syndrome. And this is, of course, where the captives actually establish a relationship with their captors, and it's a dependence relationship where the captives feel they can't actually exist without being in that relationship. And the Tories have shown that they are going to effectively push more and more people into destitution, into hardship, and indeed into death, if not ill health, but into death, as we've seen with the DWP over the last few years and with the eradication of the NHS. And people say, no, it's not happening. Oh, it absolutely defies belief that people can still make that claim when it's clear for all to see. And all they've got to do really is go down to their local hospital and ask the staff there what their perception is of the NHS and the future of the institution. Another area where Jeremy Corbyn is getting some serious grief from the media is over his budget, or the planned cost of his policies. Yet it is only the Labour Party that has made any effort to effectively cost out their policies. We know that the Tories have increased the national debt by 70% in the last 7 years. Yeah, you heard that correctly. 70%. The national debt was just under £1 trillion when David Cameron came into office in 2010, and it now stands at £1.7 trillion. And as you can see from this listing here, Jeremy Corbyn's policies are primarily going to be funded by reversing corporation tax cuts. And, of course, this is where a true corporatist society favours the corporations, where it's penalise the people and favour the corporations and the executives at the top of those corporations earning outrageous salaries. In fact, their salaries in some cases are literally pornographic by comparison to the minimum wage 2 hours contracts that they offer to many of their employees. So in a true capitalist society where capitalism has a social conscience, then the corporations are more than happy to make their contributions to maintaining the social fabric. But of course, we don't have a capitalist society anymore. We have a corporatist society, a monopolistic corporatist society. And just like in the game of Monopoly, where the winner literally takes total possession of the board, and that's what's occurring here. So today is the day when either there is the opportunity to at least stem that headlong rush into a corporatist police state, or that it basically, through the Stockholm Syndrome, is rushed through. And if that is the case, I must confess that the likelihood of many critics and commentators of the corporatist establishment remaining at liberty throughout that 5 years is unfortunately regressing quite dramatically. But let's have a look at the state of play as is perceived by the lamestream media. This was the poll of polls published by the Evening Standard around about midday today. And they were showing that based on the responses they were getting, 44% people would vote Conservative, 36% Labour, and the rest basically are an irrelevance. Unless, of course, those votes swing to Labour. And as you can see here, if the Lib Dems, they're 8%. If much of that swung to Labour and UKIP swung to Labour, then it's a different ballgame. But maybe this isn't the case, because there's a couple of factors here that we established earlier this morning. The vast majority of polls are taken by calling people on their landlines. And an increasing number of people, particularly young people and people at the lower end of the social strata, they no longer maintain a landline. They only use their mobile phones. So consequently, the demographic that contributes to the poll returns is somewhat skewed. So I would suggest that these polls should actually be not taken too seriously and should be taken with a bit of a pinch. But this is one that actually caught my attention first thing this morning. And this was on a website called Squawkbox. And it said, the final election polls give Jeremy Corbyn the lead over Theresa May for the first time. The final poll before voting suggests that Ladbrokes' extraordinary odds of 20-1 against Theresa May becoming Prime Minister might suggest that the bookmakers' own research is the reason behind May's long odds. Well, the counter to the opinion polls calling people on their landlines is that the bookies tend to poll people who are actually potential customers in the betting shops. And many of those will literally not be at the same demographic as the other polls. So there's something askew here. But everybody acknowledges that everything today comes down to turnout. Now, unfortunately, the weather favours the Tories, that's for sure, because many Labour voters will not have the luxury of personal transport. But everyone, all the pollsters, acknowledge that that turnout is absolutely critical here. Now, I'm going to show you some interesting information here from the betting shops at the moment. But this was the one that caught my eye this morning. This was Ladbrokes. 20 to 1 for Theresa May to be Prime Minister. Now, there is no way that Ladbrokes would be offering 20 to 1. I believe there are some conditions attached to taking up this offer, but there's no way that Ladbrokes would be offering 20 to 1 odds unless they felt that actually the likelihood of her becoming Prime Minister was greatly reduced. So let's have a look at some of the betting odds here. And, we're a little over halfway through polling day. So the Conservative majority, which of course all the mainstream polls believe will be the case, and for that it's 5 to 1 on. So in other words, you've got to put £5 down to win a pound. Labour majority, 12 to 1. Okay, not bad odds there. Most seats. For the Conservatives to get most seats, 10 to 1 on. Not necessarily a majority, but most seats of any party. A Labour Labour most seats, also 12 to 1. But now this is where it starts to get interesting. Corbyn to be Prime Minister in a Labour SNP coalition is 22 to 1. And Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister in a Labour Lib Dem SNP coalition, God forbid, because nothing will ever get done, but that's 40 to 1. 40 to 1. Now, the odds on Jeremy Corbyn winning an outright majority and becoming Prime Minister are absolutely off the scale. So, worth a punt, actually. So, if you haven't yet ventured out, then maybe this is the incentive to do so. But go via the betting shop. I know, not that I'm encouraging people to bet, but, if you fancy a little wager, instead of buying a lottery ticket, maybe put your £2 on a punt for Jeremy Corbyn, and then go make it happen. Go to the polling station, and hey, you never know. You might actually make a small profit out of it. But as we've been discussing over the last few days, the population that is absolutely going to determine the outcome of this election are those who traditionally elect not to vote. And this is the graph that I've been showing now every day this week, where we have a massive 34% of the country, just over 1/3 of those eligible to vote in this country do not vote. And over the last few days, of course, there's been some very, very interesting comments being posted on the YouTubes of these last 3 episodes of Humanity vs. Insanity, even to the extent of the fact that I'm promoting a vote for Jeremy Corbyn must suggest that I'm on the take from the establishment. I mean, please, is that the best you can do? What we're trying to do here is literally give some of the people who are being totally shafted by the Tory administration at least a bit of reprise. Jeremy Corbyn is not the panacea. He is not the solution. All that is going to happen with the Labour administration is that we're going to stem the flow and the rush into a corporatist state. And people say, yeah, but Brexit's more important. Jeremy Corbyn has stated categorically that he will uphold the will of the people and he will negotiate Brexit. Maybe differently from Theresa May, but he will negotiate Brexit. And based on what we've seen of Theresa May's negotiating skills, the likelihood of a Brexit is slim to none. And of course, it's well established that Theresa May is surreptitiously destroying the British military in readiness for full integration with the EU. So the likelihood of Brexit happening with Theresa May in number 10 is greatly reduced anyway. So, the Brexit issue is important, absolutely crucial. But Jeremy Corbyn has proven himself to be in touch with the will of the people. You look at his speeches over his parliamentary career, and he's had his finger on the pulse of the public opinion. So that 34%, let's try and reduce that 34% and make sure that whatever percentage now comes off that 34% and agrees to vote actually recognises that the best way in which they can use that vote is to vote Corbyn. Now, I have to say that there is not a cat's chance in hell of me ever encouraging or recommending that people voted Labour under a Gordon Brown-led leadership or Ed Miliband. This is based upon Jeremy Corbyn. And Jeremy Corbyn's power base is not the Labour Party. My goodness me, the Labour Party have tried twice to ensure that he either in the first instance didn't achieve the position of leader of the party, and then secondly, of course, they tried to remove him. Jeremy Corbyn's power base is the will of the people. The will of the people. So something like 1 million people registered for membership of the Labour Party over the last couple of years. Well, over the next couple of years, maybe it should be 2 or 3 million more people, and maybe the British public should participate in the political process whilst we are working to bring about systemic change, which maybe even the political process won't achieve. Now, everything is strategic here. Everything is about working in the stages. And I know we're getting through. And I've received so many tweets and emails from people who have thought about it and acknowledged that never in their lives has it been more important that they actually vote and participate in this charade than now. And I just want to share one with you because this, I think, epitomizes really what it is that we've been trying to say. And it says, "Hi Ian, I just voted Labour. I never vote. It's a fraud. The lower depths of hell now await me for committing this act. I'll meet you there for a pint. Cheers." Well, so be it. So be it. Maybe we are dancing with the devil, but let's call that tune. Let's make sure that the devil is dancing to our tune and not that of the global corporatist establishment. So just a couple of brief reminders before I encourage you to switch off and get down the polling station. And we talked about the collapse of the NHS. And the one thing that I was reminded that I hadn't really expanded upon was Theresa May's commitment to the Naylor Review. And here in this graph, you see here that although healthcare expenditure has increased from 55 million in 1997 to pushing over 150 million in 2013, the service is deteriorating at a phenomenal rate of knots. And Theresa May has claimed that the NHS will get the funding it needs, but she hasn't been particularly transparent as to where that funding's coming from. Well, the Naylor Review spells it out in words of one syllable, and that is that the NHS is going to be forced, the NHS trusts are going to be forced to sell off their property, and they're going to be encouraged to sell off that property, and they're going to be incentivized by central government to sell off that property. And then that's the money that they can then use. And if they don't sell off their property, then they won't get the funding. So we know that literally within the next 2 to 3 weeks, some 19 hospitals around the country are going to be announced for closure. And beyond that number, a number of accident emergency facilities, a number of maternity facilities are also going to be closed down. So I must confess that, as a lifelong capitalist, I'm an absolute believer in pure capitalism, where capitalism accepts that it has a social responsibility and takes great pleasure in contributing to maintaining a sound social fabric. But basically the next few years are going to see the social fabric eroded like nothing before. And we won't recognise this country in 2022 if Theresa May gets the majority that she's now seeking. Well, I also mentioned yesterday Nicholas Wilson, the Independent, who was shut down by the chairman in the hustings in Hastings because Amber Rudd, and I showed the video of this yesterday, Amber Rudd had passed a note to the chairman of the event when Nicholas Wilson started waxing lyrical about the Tory government's relationship with Saudi Arabia and the relationship between arms trafficking with Saudi Arabia, the illegal wars, particularly in Yemen, and of course the likelihood of increased terror events in the UK as a result of our arms trade with Saudi and Israel and other Middle East countries. Well, the media, even the mainstream media, are now acknowledging that Amber Rudd, who I forecast yesterday, is the prospective replacement for Theresa May, because somehow I do not see Theresa May in office. Let me be generous, by the end of the year. Maximum by the end of the year. She is intellectually incapable of handling that role. She is way out of her depth in the Brexit negotiations. And actually the likelihood of the UK achieving a decent Brexit result with Theresa May at the table is slim to none. So Amber Rudd is being set up, in my opinion, to take the helm. But in Hastings, it may well not be a done deal. And in fact, this was a headline in the Sussex Press today. General election 2017, will the Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, provide Thursday's Portillo moment? And of course, the reference to Michael Portillo is the reference to the 1997 election when Tony Blair, of course, came into office for the first time. And Michael Portillo lost his safe seat in, I believe it was Enfield in North London. Well, Amber Rudd has a majority from the last election of just under 5,000 votes. But Hastings and Rye is not a particularly affluent part of the country. Although it's in the southeast, East Sussex is actually quite remote. And, you know, a little known fact about East Sussex is that East Sussex, as a county, actually only has 17 miles of dual carriageway. It really is quite a remote part of the south of England. And Hastings has been the sort of poor relation of the South Coast resorts for quite some time. And so my sense is that Amber Rudd's constituents may not necessarily be particularly impressed by her track record in Parliament, particularly her voting for some of the cuts in welfare payments, which will have affected a significant number of her constituents. So unless, of course, IDOX come to the rescue. And IDOX is a company that I absolutely encourage everyone to watch very closely. And if you do have the luxury of being present at any of the counts tonight, then do watch the boxes, the postal votes that are brought in, and do actually watch the ballot boxes, because we've also seen in the past elections some very, very suspicious unsealed ballot boxes being brought into the count at interesting junctures, like when preferred candidates seem to be falling behind in the true count. So go to the IDOX website. This is the website that is run by Peter Lilly, who, of course, is a Tory MP. No conflict of interest there, of course. And you know, this is how elections are manipulated. They've been manipulated this way certainly since 2005, when Tony Blair was at the pits of his popularity after the invasion of Iraq, and yet he still somehow managed to increase his majority in his constituency in Sedgefield. So, you know, it's very important that people do get out and vote today. I mean, Theresa May has made it very, very clear what her intentions are. And here's the paraphrase. She says, I'm going to take the pensions, the social care and the NHS away from OAPs and give the money to big business and billionaires in tax breaks. And you know what? The idiots will still vote for me. They really are that stupid. This is one arrogant politician. She has arrogant advisors, and they genuinely believe that the British public are so dumb that they can be taken in by the Murdoch press and manipulated in the way of sheep or cattle, goy, as a particular group of people refer to us. So the devil is very much in the detail. And I haven't mentioned this in the past few days, but I mean, anybody voting Tory in the north of England is effectively voting for the destruction of the ecology in the north of England and voting for the decimation of the tourist and agricultural industry in that area. And what you see on the screen there with all these coloured squares, these are the areas that are licensed for unconventional gas exploitation in the north of England, i.e. fracking. And if that wasn't bad enough, and we will be talking a little bit more about this tomorrow, because tomorrow we'll be looking at a strategy, whether that's a strategy of working, hopefully, to influence a Labour-led or a Jeremy Corbyn-led administration, or continuing the fight against rampant corporatism. So we will be looking a little bit more at what's occurring, particularly at Preston New Road, in just outside Blackpool in Lancashire, and of course in Yorkshire, and just in Kirby Misperton, and also just outside York. But other areas in the East Midlands, in Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire and Cheshire are also under threat. But if you think the threat is just fracking, then I would encourage you to take a look at Fracking Nightmare, episode number 72, which actually was broadcast, I think, some 18 months ago, where I put forward the evidence that would suggest that the whole unconventional gas industry, i.e. fracking, is actually a Trojan horse to provide the British government with repositories for its highly toxic nuclear waste. And it's now over 2 years, nearly 3 years in fact, since I first mooted this. And I've had 2 meetings, or attended 2 meetings, with Radioactive Waste Management. And in each case, when I broach this subject, it's like deer in the headlights. So if you live in the north of England and you think that fracking is a good idea, well, maybe you should look beyond what's on the table right now. And guess who was behind this? Oh, look, it's none other than Amber Rudd. Amber Rudd, when she was working at the Department of Energy. So it's the same players. You know, it was previously, before her, it was Michael Fallon. Of course, he's now Minister of Defence. And of course, you have to be able to demonstrate that you are a true socio-psychopath to be able to hold these positions. So Amber Rudd, now as Home Secretary, potentially leader of the Conservative Party, and potentially Prime Minister. And she will certainly, obviously, have some attachment to this agenda to use the unconventional gas wells to their full potential, which is as repositories for the disposal of highly toxic nuclear waste. And if you think this is just rampant conspiracy theory, then, as I've said, please go and look at episode number 72. But as you will see on this graphic here, one of the things that I talk about in that episode is the work of Professor Fergus Gibb at University of Sheffield, who is on point for leading this project on the very deep borehole disposal of high-level nuclear waste. So perhaps you start to see why this is a crucial election and why participation has never been more important. Add to all that, of course, that Theresa May is looking to rip up the European Convention on Human Rights, which is actually a document that was based upon the work of Winston Churchill after the Second World War. So the European Convention on Human Rights is actually ostensibly of British origin, but Theresa May wants to tear it up, all under the guise of prevention of terrorism, but we know that it goes way deeper than that. You know, it was only up until a few months ago that I and many others were relieved of being tagged as domestic extremists because of our concern over the unconventional gas agenda. So if this does happen, that's why I make the observation that if she comes back into office, or Tories come back into office, the likelihood of being at liberty in 5 years' time, unfortunately, will recede significantly. So, to sum up, you know, a lot of people think that by not voting, that's their rebellion. It's not. It's abdication. It's abdication of a responsibility. And you may not agree with the process. I certainly don't. You may not like the process. I certainly don't. But right now, it's the best we've got. And it's about buying time. That increasing level of the population that is becoming politically aware And as Zbigniew Brzezinski also acknowledged, spiritually aware, which is another element that scares the bejesus out of the establishment. So let's buy the time. And bear in mind what I said, Jeremy Corbyn's power base is not the Labour Party, it's the people. And this we have not seen at any time in recent history. So when you skip voting, it's not rebellion, it's absolute surrender. So my final words for today, really, with some 6.5 hours remaining to cast your vote, is if you haven't done already, get out there and vote. Because the local media are acknowledging that there is a massive swing towards support for Jeremy Corbyn. So let's turn this swing into a reality. And just to make it more interesting, on your way to the polling station, pop into the betting shop and just put the £2 that you were going to spend on the lottery ticket on Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister by tomorrow night. I'll see you tomorrow afternoon and we'll weigh up the events of today.